Hello everyone, my name is Marian Guevara. A huge hello and a huge thank you to anyone who's just clicking on this video, who is checking out the channel or is subscribed. I greatly appreciate it. Today I'll be doing one of my book review discussion videos, and it's for two books today. They are the first two installments of what is known as the Library Trilogy, penned by the author Mark Lawrence, and those two are The Book That Wouldn't Burn and in the sequel, The Book That Broke the World. I read these two just recently, in fact, and I enjoyed them very much. I think these are definitely my favorite fantasy books I've read so far in the year. So I enjoyed them so much that I decided to dedicate an entire video where I discuss, once again, my thoughts about them, about the themes that are explored in these books, what I think about them, and, just share what I enjoyed about these two first books in the trilogy. So if you're very interested, please stick around and let's begin. One thing of note I should mention is that this is going to be a spoiler-free discussion video, so no need to worry about me revealing any major details, reveals, or any of that. So this will be spoiler-free. And to start off, I'll be giving a basic premise of the first book, The Book That Wouldn't Burn. And here we're following two perspectives, Avar and Levira, two individuals that come from very different backgrounds but are connected through this library, this eternally expansive library, housing knowledge from not only human sources, but just several different species sources. And so these two are drawn together through this library, meet each other through this library, and they end up getting sucked into this conflict that has erupted from the library. This conflict that deals with the question of whether or not humanity, society, should be privy to this knowledge, this wealth of knowledge. This book got on my radar after watching one of Philip Chase's videos, one of his recommendation videos, all of them more or less themed, and I believe this one was from the video that, like fantasy books that will sort of blow your mind. I think it was something like that, one of those videos. But yeah, one thing I've heard about The Book That Wouldn't Burn, about this trilogy, is that it's described as weird and confusing, and I honestly, I see a pattern for myself. I tend to like books, fantasy books, that tend to be described as weird. The Mirror Visitor Quartet was described as weird. I loved that. The Books of Babel were described as weird, and I loved it. And this one was a hit for me. So yeah, clearly I have like a inclination towards books that are perceived, or fantasy books that are perceived as sort of out there. The Book That Wouldn't Burn also stands out because, similar to The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett that I read this year, it does some genre blending, and it does it well. So you have a nice blend of fantasy, but then also sci-fi. I don't think it's a huge spoiler to admit that there are elements of time travel included in this book, in this series. I mentioned there are humans, but then there are also other species involved in the series. In fact, in the second book, The Book That Broke the World, there's even mention of one of these species coming from one of the moons. So there are elements of like space travel as well. So you have fantasy, you have sci-fi, you also have romance subplots that occur in both books as well. So you get a bit of romance in there. And I think Lawrence does a good job of balancing all these types of genres together without it making seem cluttered. I also enjoyed the world building. I think a lot of the world building is devoted to the actual library itself, the physical library. However, we do get to see a bit of like other settlements, the city that rests at the bottom of the mountain where the library is held. So we do get to see a bit of, the aristocracy, the monarchy, that culture within the city. However, I think the majority of the world building is focused on the library, and the library does certainly feel like its own character. So you have animal guides, you have these almost automaton-like assistants that may or may not be helpful. You have machines that can allow you to enter the world of a library. So yeah, a lot of recognizable elements in a library, but then there's just a lot of strange otherworldly elements as well that can kind of be jarring. And of course, with a strange fantastical setting, you have to populate it with a cast of characters, and we have some great ones in The Book That Wouldn't Burn, and I really enjoyed seeing it expand in the sequel, The Book That Broke the World. I think Lawrence does a really good job characterizing them, making them not archetypes, but leaning more towards feeling like real flesh and blood. You see them struggle with their desires, their ideals, what they want, the decisions that they make, and you see how they're influenced by their background, how they may have suffered in the past, and how it affects them in the future. One of my favorite elements of the series are the themes and the discussions that arise out of the conflict that is introduced into the story. And I think Lawrence does a good job of capturing this frustration, exasperation that comes with futility. In many ways, it reminds me of the Books of Babel by Josiah Bancroft, because in that series, you have characters that are confronted with this futility. You have this, the Tower of Babel, this structure, the society within it that has fallen incredibly short of the ideals that motivated its construction. You have this corruption that is institutionalized and so ingrained into it that you have this fear that the rot may be too far in, that there is no point in trying to fix or heal what is too damaged. And, any means, any concessions that you make, any little improvements you try to do to fix a problem end up backfiring. So you have this overwhelming feeling of futility, of, why bother? And I kind of got that same feeling when reading the Library trilogy, because the conflict here and the futility, I think, arises from a much more grander sense, from a grander perspective. So in this world, you have had humanity, all these different cultures have access to this well of knowledge, this immense well of knowledge. And what ends up happening, more or less, is that each civilization takes this knowledge and ends up either destroying itself or destroying each other. And it just keeps on repeating over and over and over again. Civilizations rise and fall. And it's always due to the same thing: people misusing the knowledge that is available to them. Instead of using it to create this state of peace and prosperity, they just end up using it for destruction. And it's been going on since time immemorial. And by the first book, the powers that be over the library have decided that we need to make a stand now. We need to make a final decision. Okay, compromise isn't working. It does boil down to a question of whether or not humanity can be trusted with knowledge, with information. And that is such a timely discussion to be had, a discussion that can be applicable to any age, whether in the past, present, or future. We are introduced to these characters, Ivar and Levira, and they are sucked into this conflict as well. And while it's going on, I mentioned that you have time travel involved, and that really convolutes the plot in many ways. But it convolutes it in a way that, at least for me, didn't take away from my enjoyment. Like, it wasn't so convoluted that I couldn't understand anything, or it was very difficult. If anything, the time travel aspect helps expand the world beyond the library. And it shows events that were introduced in the first and the second book. It shows them in different contexts. It shows how they're interconnected with one another. It's proof that you shouldn't mess with time. One of the major plot points is the presence of this book. And it's basically this anomaly within the flow of time. And it's like an Ouroboros that's eating its own tail. And it just adds more conflict to the already grand conflict that's playing out in the series. Another thing that I really like seeing explored, that Lawrence explored, were characters' reactions to conflict. So basically, it's one thing to have, a debate, like a theoretical debate with regards to ideals, but by the second book, by The Book That Broke the World, you have these characters now that are forced to take action, forced to take sides. We have to see whether they stand up and act according to all these ideals that they are espousing. And I like the fact that Lawrence portrays these characters going through such conflicting emotions. It's very simple to think, okay, this character believes in this and therefore they would act accordingly, but obviously it's going to be much more conflicting than that. You have these various different factors, you know. You have memories of your past, you have the attachments that you have to other people, and they also will affect your decision. And there's this great line towards the end of the second book, which I honestly don't think it's any spoilers, but it's this: all of these words are noise. The only role the brain plays in these decisions is to come up with the explanation after the heart has chosen. And I think that's a very human, very raw human look at it. When it boils down to it, when you're forced to make a decision, it's gonna be the heart that will determine where you go, and the brain is gonna be there to sort of justify your decision. It's very not ideal, but I think a pretty fair and human response. So that was my discussion on the book that wouldn't burn and the book that broke the world. This is such a prime example of why I don't like reading or starting series that aren't finished, because now I'm sitting here waiting for the third book to come out. The second book only came out, I think, like last month or something like that, but I want a third and final book because it ended with a cliffhanger and ended with a lot of people in trouble, and I need to know what happens. So yeah, I hope I intrigued you enough to at least pick up the book that wouldn't burn. This was my first Mark Lawrence books. I've seen his name on the shelves over the years, but this is my first time reading from him. And yeah, it's been a winner. It's been a winner so far. So yeah. Once again, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!